You on this windy evening, although I think it's down a tiny bit. We have a very special presentation tonight. However, there are some very special things I need to say first. Next month is our big, gigantic, huge, we hope, 60th anniversary celebration. 60. And it's going to be here. The Kern Historical Society was formed in 1959, in May of 1959. So next month it will be 60 years. And we have a big event planned here. We're going to have displays from various groups and people in the community that will portray history of the area. And we're starting at 8 o'clock in the morning and having kids in the 4th grade come and look. And so the kids will be here in the morning. They're getting bussed out, at least that's the plan, bussed out in shifts. And the kids will be here probably until 11:30 or 12?
No, till about 1:30.
Till about 1:30, okay. And then after that, this will be, open for people to come and view the displays at their leisure. Fran could sort of give you an overview of what we're expecting.
I thought you wanted me to do the Vanna White thing.
Yeah, well, she's also going to do the Vanna White.
My Vanna White impression here.
We have a special poster that we have made celebrating our 60th anniversary, and they are for sale for $5. What a deal. All right, Fran, can you just give us a few of the that we know for sure?
So we are going to have a display of our founding fathers 60 years ago and corresponding with what we have today and our mission statement. We'll have a pictorial display on this wall of building history, our older buildings and what they are today. The Edwards Museum is going to be here. There'll be a Pancho Bonds display. There'll be a gold mine display. Help me out. Who else? You're doing a Roseman Fair and Rodeo.
Community Fair.
Yeah.
Display.
So those are a few of the ones that, we're going to have a car display out in the parking lot. There's going to be the raceway from Willow Springs. And there's going to be a, Tom, where's Tom? What is that? A Fairlane and a Chevy truck. And then we're going to have a Model T car out there in the parking lot. And
it's just going to be hopefully a good time, and you'll see a lot of neat things. When we went, I've been working with Ella Garcia on the Roseman Community Fair, and we spent so much time saying, "Oh, look, there's so-and-so." It's really a lot of fun to go back and look and see pictures of. Some of you are in those pictures years ago. Yeah. Okay, so. I think the other big thing is we're going to need help because I'm an old lady. I cannot be out here from 8 o'clock in the morning on May the 9th until 7 o'clock at night nonstop. I'm going to need some help. So we would like to have some volunteers so some of us can sort of take a break. And we have a sign-up sheet for people who would volunteer to help, just sort of be here and answer questions or point out things if they want to, but just be here. So we're going to set everything up here on Tuesday when the library is open. We'll have the whole room and we're going to set up on Tuesday. The library's closed on Wednesday. Then 8 o'clock Thursday morning, we will open with the kids arriving as soon as they can get them on the bus and here. So we need some shifts on Thursday. I think I said Tuesday. On Thursday, we need people maybe in 2-hour shifts or hour-and-a-half shifts. So we have like 7:45 to 9:30, 11:30 to 1:30, 1:30 to 3:30, 3:30 to 5, 5 to 7. And then on Friday, we'll probably be here taking everything down. So if any of you can give us any little bit of time, it would really, really be appreciated. What's the easiest? Do you want to pass this around or just put it on one of the tables? what do people,
Just put it on the table and you can sign out.
it'll be on the table in the back.
Well, why don't you stand at the door, not let them out until it's
That's a good
Good
thought.
idea, Matt.
That's a good one. Okay, is there anything that I have neglected?
Oh, I'm sure we'll let you know if we have later.
They'll let me know later.
Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay, what's your question?
So, will West Park Elementary School be part of that thing where kids?
If you're in the 4th grade, it's 4th grade only.
Yeah, I'm in 5th grade.
Then you'll have to come after school. Yeah, tell your mom and dad you want to come after
Come
school.
after school, because
No.
we will be here until 7 o'clock. Okay. All righty, so
Well, Gretchen, I'm gonna just, we are so lucky to have John Joyce, who has been videotaping our programs, and if you have not signed up, it is John Joyce Media,
Joyce Media, Inc.
Joyce Media Inc.
on YouTube.
On YouTube. Please sign up. You get a chance to go back and look at the historical things. But one of the things that I have found as we go back, and anybody that's done videotaping, you know when there's a lot of background noise, we lose what's going on up at the front. So I'm just going to really ask that you be mindful of background noise so that John can get this great opportunity to hear and record Joe Pauly's story. Joe Pauly's father goes back to
First Anglo kid born at Muroc, which was the predecessor to the base, in 1912.
So you are getting a chance to hear firsthand, secondhand history from 1912. So we really want to make sure we're getting a good recording of that. So thank you.
Okay, so with no further ado, introduce.
Oh,
Mr.
with
Program
no
Chair.
further ado, if you don't know Joe Pauly, there might be some that call Joe Pauly typical Roseman. A kind, caring man, but with fantastic knowledge of local history and those things. His father was the station master out in Muroc in the early 1900s.
My granddad.
Granddad. And then we've got history up through mining, through rodeoing, and so just such a wealth of history here. We literally have 100 years of history. So without further ado, Joe is going to tell his story. We've got video, and his son Gil is going to help along with this process.
Thank you, Siobhan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm Joe Pauly. My dad was Joe Pauly as well. He passed away in 2000. He was the first Anglo kid born at Muroc before the base came in. And most of you may know that, but it was actually the Coram brothers. Actually, in some of this I've got. Let me read this to you. I think this is going to cover a little bit of when we first came to this part of the country. It was my granddad. Muroc station agent retires after 38 years. Bernard B. Pauly, my granddad, began his long term of service with the Santa Fe in 1911 at Pica, Arizona. He first went to Muroc in 1912. Mr. Pauly was a young man when he took charge of the station, which in 1912 was nothing more than a telegraph station, 10 by 16 feet. The building served for the agent's duties until World War II, when the present modern station was erected. The Paulys raised 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Mrs. Pauly found time to paint, stressing Western subjects for her pictures. One Indian mural has hung in the new station since it was built. In the weird land of sandy wastelands situated on the edge of a great dry lake, Muroc's history really began about 68 years ago when in 1882 the Santa Fe established Yucca Station, then one of the better railroad stations between Needles and Mojave. It boasted 2 sidings, a water tank, a well, a platform, 4 section houses, and a pump house. In 1910, 2 brothers named Coram took up a homestead at Muroc. The name Coram was reversed, and reading backwards became Muroc, replacing the old name of Yucca. On this site was Muroc's first post office. Muroc Lake was first known as Rodriguez Lake, named in 1865 for the Rodriguez Mining Company, which was prospecting for gold and silver. It became Rogers Lake 2 years later. Mr. Pauly has seen many changes in this part of the Mojave Desert since he started his career as agent in an old boxcar. This was a newspaper clipping from, I think, 1949, give or take. And the reason I'm getting that is not anything that was on the clipping, but if he started with them in 1911 and you add 38 years, then that's 1949. So that's how I came up with that. So now we're going to go through some of these pictures. This first one on your left, that's my mother and my father. Location, I do not know. Any of you people, any of us in this room, if we take pictures, of course a lot of stuff's digital now, but do yourself a favor and write something on the back and write it in something that can be read. You cannot believe the amount of pictures that I have, and almost nothing has been written on. So I'm just, in fact, some of these I had to really look close, and there's still people in some of these that I don't know. But this is Mom and Dad here. Grandpa and Grandma Pauly there in the middle, and I know nothing about the location of that building. Number 3, actually, that looks like it's out of order. That one there is, let me see if I can find my notes on it. Okay, they're on top of the castle in Mexico City where Maximilian and his wife Carlotta reigned. Grandpa said, "How do you like my new hat I got in Cleveland?" That was written on the back of the photo. This other one on the bottom.
Joe, can you turn around? We're losing you.
Can I what?
Turn around your mic.
Your mic keeps going off.
It keeps going off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I just hold it, or instead of it being... It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So keep facing this way?
Yeah.
Okay. See, part of the problem I'm having here is like I said, I had these numbered, so, and I'm not, I don't know if that's, okay. Okay, if this is one, then that's Grandpa Pauly and my Grandma Margaret, who in later life became an artist and had that piece hanging out there at the depot. I actually tried to go online to see if I could research any of her art or anything, but unsuccessfully. So I really would like to know more about that. I have some paintings at home, small stuff that she had done, desert scenes and so on and so forth over the years. But I don't know a lot about the history. But there again, Grandpa and Grandma Pauly, and then that one in the middle is the same. And then I believe, I did not know for certain, but I believe that's at their home in Muroc, where they're sitting.
Blocking the antenna, and then it
Okay.
goes off.
Where should I stand then?
Where should he stand, Mac?
Standing. Just put that over on the other side.
We had a few technical difficulties.
That any better?
Yeah, just fine, yeah.
Okay, go to the next one, Gil. Okay, on the left, this is the oldest daughter, my Aunt Agnes, and I have no idea. Well, I may have had a note. Well, I got another picture of her. I'm not sure how old she was there. The one in the middle at the top, that's me as a baby.
Oh,
And one reason I'm wearing the hat, I had a lot better hairdo back then. but below is my youngest brother, Al, on the left, and then mother and dad, and then me on the right. And then I do not know who the lady is on the left, but then that's Grandma and Grandpa, and I do not know the location there on the right. Go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, that sign is saying Muroc, and that one did have some text on the back. And I don't really understand 100% how this is working. I'm kind of thinking that possibly my granddad wrote this down, but this is what it says. This is our first cashier, Mr. Burke. His wife on the right is his clerk, and the other lady, Mrs. Brewer, lives in Lancaster. She rides out every day with a man that works on the Army base. Her husband has a radiator shop in Lancaster. Her whole working life, she has done clerical work. She is a good contometer operator. She can add figures so quick on her contometer, it makes your head swim. She is my clerk and handles a lot of the express business. So, like I said, that's a little bit of a mystery to me. But my granddad was a station agent, and so of course he was receiving and sending orders. And I know that groceries and ice did come on the rail cars there back in those days. I got to go out there one time where the station house was that my granddad worked out of. There's basically nothing left. You could see part of the road bed. There was a little bit of foundation and stuff. On the east side was the station house. There was the track. And on the west side was the house where they resided. And like I said, there's just not hardly anything left there when I was there. And it's probably been, I don't know, time flies. My dad passed away in 2000, so it was before that. I'm going to say maybe back in the 90s or something when I was there. So anyway, that's that text that I just read from there. That's up in the middle is my mother and my granddad. And believe it or not, that guy could do one-arm push-ups. I've never been able, I can barely do a two-arm one. He can do a one-arm push-up. On the right is my mother and her mother who lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Okay, this is the next one. Right? Okay, this is Mom and Dad here on the left, and like I said, there's very, very few of these that have any text. Grandma and Grandpa again in the middle, and then that one to the right, I already told you, in Mexico. Down on the bottom here, the one on the left, I do not recognize. The next man is Cleo Heron. He was a friend of my aunt and uncle. The third one from the left I don't recognize. And then I believe it's my dad, my uncle, and my granddad. And I believe that's in front of the house out there at Muroc, right across from the station house and the track. Up here, the three on the top on the left, I don't think I recognize any of them, but right there in the middle is my granddad. That's Cleo and Mildred Heron on the left. That's my aunt in the front. And I'm going to guess, and I'm not 100% for sure, but the one with her arms around my aunt, I believe, is Grandma. And then my mom to the right and my dad. And then down on the bottom here, that was Dad. And my number deal's a little bit screwed up here because of the way this is doing, but I can still find stuff, I think that guy's name was Dick Fenning, like P-F-E-N-N-I-N-G. So if anybody knows if that name means something to anybody else, then it'd be nice to know, but it doesn't mean anything to me. This picture up here again, that's Mildred and Cleo, and then my uncle Al and his wife Aunt Juanita. And then I believe that's my grandma there in the middle at the bottom, and then my granddad and mother to the right, and then the ones at the top, I don't know. Here, that's me on the left, my granddad on the, there behind me. That's my cousin Dottie, who used to live in Southgate, California, in the middle, and then my Uncle Al on the right. Mary Wellman and I out for a ride there in the middle. And then the ladies over here. I'm not 100% sure, and because the numbering thing is kind of messed up, I'm not going to even try to waste time talking about that one. So go to the next one.
Now, Joe, these would have been out at Muroc, right? These pictures?
Well, yeah, definitely. Okay, like the one on the right there, I'm presuming, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty, never assume because it makes an ass out of you and me, but I mean, sometimes that's the best you can do. But I would assume that would be at the house at Muroc. Down here on the bottom in the middle, that's the only picture I think I've got. That's my uncle, and then the guy on the left was a friend, Carl Pauly. He loved to bet the horses. I always, that's one of the things I never did. I always wanted to go to the racetrack with him and never did it. So if you're going to do something, set a date and do it. Amen. But he was a character. On the top at the left here, that is the lady on the left. The two ladies on the left I do not know. But then there's my mom, I think, the plaid skirt, and my Aunt Clara, which was the baby of the family on the right, and that's at their home in Southgate, California. And then down here on the bottom, Dad, Mom, myself, my Uncle Bob Ellsman, then his wife, Aunt Clara, my aunt, their daughter, Marie, and then my Aunt Agnes, that's the oldest daughter. She was born in 1908. And then my granddad, and then my aunt and uncle are there on the right, but I'm not sure who the other gentleman is. Up here is my dad, my Aunt Clara, my Aunt Agnes, my granddad, and my Uncle Al. And then over here, that's Mildred and Cleo again, Uncle Al and Anita. I think Margaret, Pauly, my grandmother, and then Dad, Granddad, and Mom, and I don't know the three on the top. My granddad, I believe, outlived at least two wives. I think the first was Goldie, and then Margaret, and then I remember when we were kids, I think I was 10 years old when he passed away, but I remember that we used to go down to Anaheim and Southgate, and what I remember the most is living here in the country. God, I hated the city then, and I still hate it. And when you're a kid, it just seems like, you know, when are we going to get there? You know? Are we there yet? It just seems like time, when you're doing something you don't want to do, it goes very slow. But anyway, there's Mom on the left. That's a camping trip, I guess. Looks like my dad, my uncle, and I guess us boys, and then Mom rolling a bedroll or something. And then down here is, I guess, Grandma and Grandpa and my uncle back there in the back. And I'm not sure, but they're camping and she's holding a fish, so, and I have no idea where that's at. There's Mom again on the car. That belonged, I believe, to my Uncle Dick. He worked construction. There's Mom and Dad at some casino, and I have no idea where the casino is. And then my aunt and uncle in front of their house across the east side of the tracks. Those houses are still there, but they're gone. So. And here's my dad, my younger brother Al. I'm there in the kitchen, and then there's my mom. And then in the middle is my mother's grandmother and grandfather, and they lived in Tucson, Arizona. I remember we'd made quite a few trips over there to visit them. And then there's me and Mom and Dad again, and I have no idea where that is either. And then another one, I guess, out in Europe. The first guy and the third guy I don't know, but the second one, Cleo Heron, and then my dad, my Uncle Al, my granddad Bernard, and then that's a duplicate, that's my mom and dad at that casino again.
Now, Joe, what would your dad have been doing out there at Muroc?
Well, I think you're gonna see a picture here pretty quick. During the Depression, I think I've got one photo of the day's catch. That my dad and uncle they used to trap bobcat and coyote and whatever, probably badgers and so on and so forth. And I know they did a lot of that during the Depression. That, whoever wrote on that, I thought that might be interesting to some of us that still remember Kelm's Lumber Yard, which was basically across from the high school. And then on the right, that photo, you can see Muroc on it, but I have no idea really what that is. But it's interesting, you know, it says Muroc.
Joe, I recognize that casino. It's called Lost Money. My husband and I have been there.
Where is it, in Nevada?
Yeah.
What, lost money? Yeah, they all say that. Kind of like that exit thing over there. Okay, here's Dad, and then there's the four siblings. The oldest sister, my Aunt Agnes on the left, and then Uncle Al's the next oldest, and then my father. So they're actually sitting in chronological order. Joe, and then my Aunt Clara, and then I'm not sure where that's at. And then this is my dad on the bottom, my youngest son Ryan in the middle, and my mother.
Okay, now Joe, up here, who would have been involved in Roseman? Would your sisters have been involved in Roseman, or just your dad and your uncle?
Well, I've got one full brother who is dead. He died at 20 years of age. And then I have two half-sisters. The one half-sister lives in Missouri, I think Springfield, Missouri, and I have seen her over the years back and forth some. She has a different mother, but my father was her father. And then I took a 40-day trip after I retired this last year in June, from the middle of August till the end of September, and I have a half-sister in Pendleton, Oregon, whom I have not seen since we were kids. And I saw her for the first time again in Pendleton, Oregon, when I was up there at the Roundup. So no, the girls were not involved. And then I found out a year ago, this last May, I have a cousin, a second cousin, that does a lot of genealogy work. And there was no name recognition, but this guy, I guess, had done the swab thing, and because of the DNA or something, I found out last May, in fact, that they came here to Rosemont and stayed at Siobhan's house, the ranch out there, which I love that myself. I'm glad they came just so I could see all those old pictures, and one of these days I'd like to get some copies of some of those, because some of those ranchers and cowboys that were in those pictures, just a little bit of trivia. My dad, at one time before he died, years back in the 80s or 90s, whatever it was, he was trying to set, he'd actually, this was a weird deal. There was a gal that he was a girlfriend, like back when he was in the Army. Well, somehow or another, they got like reacquainted. And my dad, if you knew him at all, I mean, he was a working man. He loved mining and dealing in mining equipment. I mean, you didn't hardly ever see the guy wear a suit. He's like me. I guess he did own one suit. This is the closest thing probably I've got to a suit. But the two of them ended up getting back together and got married. They bought a tract home in Palmdale, My dad dressed every day in a damn suit and wore a toupee. I mean, that was not my dad. And anyway, that lasted for a while, and then that was the end of that. But somewhere along in there, he was trying to sell some different antiques and this, that, and the other thing. Well, he come into the yard there one day with a cowboy bedroll tarp. And I said, no. I said, I want that. I said, I'll buy that from you. And the interesting thing about this bedroll tarp is that it belonged to Forrest Patterson, whom Patterson Road is named after. And I don't know what you know about those. I know Dwayne Webb, he would know what it is. It's a piece of canvas about probably 12 or 15 feet long with hooks and eyes. And you get that thing all spread out, you put your bedroll in there. Basically, it's a cowboy bed and a suitcase. And like you watch these movies and they got a blanket tied behind the saddle, that's a bunch of crap. They didn't do that. Cowboys had their bedroll in a wagon, or if they were riding the grub line in the winter, they probably had it on a pack horse because they're pretty good size. And I just went to the 30th of this January, a friend of mine and I, we went to the Cowboy Gathering in Elko, Nevada. It was the 35th annual. And dangerous country going that way. We don't go up 80, we go right straight through Bishop. And I told him, I said, you know, when you pick me up, I'm going to have that bedroll, have a down bag inside of it. I'm going to have some extra food, going to have some water, going to have my long johns, good heavy coat and stuff. Because if you break down between here and Elko, Nevada, you could die. And that was ironic too, because he said, well, yeah, we'll take my little Volkswagen diesel. It gets 60 miles to the gallon. Well, listen to this. We get up there, and somewhere in the middle of the Sagebrush Sea, we're about 200 miles from Elko, Nevada, and he's getting this engine light, which he took it in the shop to get it fixed. So we're trying to call him, and we talk to him, then we lose him, we talk to him, we lose him. We're trying to explain, the guy's saying, there any gas stations and stuff around you? And we're just looking at each other and just laughing. And he said, I'm not going to shut it off, but he said, hopefully we can make it to Elko, and we did. And then he asked, well, where's the nearest Volkswagen repair shop? It was in Twin Falls, Idaho, 170 miles. When we got there, they towed it to Twin Falls. We were done on Saturday. We got up Sunday. We drove to Twin Falls, stayed in a motel, picked the car up on Monday, and all the one-way rentals were gone, so we had to take that car back to Elko, and then we came back home. But I cherish that bedroll. It's been with me to the Centennial in Montana. They drove cattle from Roundup, Montana to Billings, and I was on a wagon train that accompanied that drive. And it's been all over the place. It's been to Death Valley 4, 5, 6 times on a wagon train there. It's been Lone Pine to Bishop on wagon trains. It's in my truck right now. If I get in that truck and go somewhere, that bedroll is going to be with me. It could be a lifesaver. There's snow in Rosamond in, I believe, one picture I think said 1984, the other one said 1985, December. And then there's my Aunt Clara and my father. This is my son Gil. Here's the story for you. I'm in the backyard when we lived here in town doing something, and my son Gil and one of his other schoolmates come to me, and they got a magazine, and there's a guy in there from back in Connecticut, and he's got a team of goats and a wagon. And these boys, we're going to build us a wagon, and we're going to train a team of goats to pull it just like this guy did. Well, now this other kid's a good kid, but I figured in a few days he's going to be on some other kick. And sure enough, he was. But my son, just about that time, he had been saving for a go-kart, and it had finally came. And he's trying to get the thing all put together. The very first thing he did is he drove over to one of the salvage yards and got some wheel hubs, Then he had his mother take him to Home Depot or whatever and get some lumber, started building the box for this wagon. And then when he got where he couldn't do anything more, then myself and Denzel Cameron and eventually Dave Kiefer, we got this wagon together. And then Denzel had some mini horse harness or something, and we used it for a template. And Dave Kiefer helped Gil get that harness built, and Denzel made some bridles for those goats, and then he helped Gil get them going. I mean, you know, I love that kind of stuff. Some of us are old enough, we watched Our Gang, you know, back in the day, and you don't see many of those goat hitches. This is my Uncle Al. This is my late wife Beverly, my father, me when I had a lot more hair, Gil, and my mother. I believe, let's see here. The one in the middle, I believe, is my grandfather's first wife, and she was the one that was the mother of I don't think they have that right in that thing about his retirement. I think Goldie was the mother of all four of the children, I believe. And then Margaret was the wife after she was deceased. So this, I think, was my two aunts here on either side of her. And then that's my Uncle Al on the right. And this is one of the girls, I think either Aunt Agnes or Aunt Clara here. And then this is Mom and I believe her grandmother that lived there in Tucson. And then Dad and grandmother Margaret. This, now we're getting into the mining. What you're looking at here is basically like a ramp, and all those posts and stuff. This is you're going to drive up this ramp, and there's a grizzly at the top of that, and you're going to dump a dump truck into that, and then that's going to get the bigger rock and stuff out. It won't let any of the big stuff. That's already been crushed anyway, but there'll still be maybe a little bit of big stuff that you didn't get. But you dump into that grizzly, and then from that grizzly that went into a ball mill, and then there was a flotation mill, and that part of that building is still there off of Silver Queen Road at the old Whitmore mine, but I don't have any pictures of it. What they're doing here, that little crane, I believe, is the crane we used to have at Pauly Brothers that we loaded scrap with, and then they're pouring some concrete and they're putting this retaining wall so that they were able to get that high enough up there to be able to dump into that ball mill. Go ahead, Ray.
Do you mind explaining what a grizzly is?
Okay, a grizzly is basically just it's like a big screen where you dump, once you dump the ore into it, it's just going to kind of screen it out so that some of the bigger rock that you don't want in is not going to go in. And even when you crush and stuff, I mean, once in a while it's not a perfect system. You're going to get some big stuff even when you don't mean to. So it's just a preventative. You don't want that big stuff in there with the other stuff. Go ahead, Jim.
I wanted to explain, I think, with all due respect to you, Joe, you take a line with me, but working with the mines over the years, a lot of times they'll use railroad ties, railroad iron, and they'll put it across the top. It's really not a screen. And what it does is it allows the loaders in different various ways of moving the aggregate and move it over to the top of this rail. And it's at a pivot, so what happens is when you drop the rock, the bigger rock falls on the ground and the smaller rock goes through, and it goes to the conveyor belt generally, and then from there it goes onward through the system. But the Grizzly is an instrument, it's a primary instrument for mining if you're out in the field. I hope that did a better job.
Okay. The way that this mill worked, which like I said, you can't see it, but once you dumped into that rock had already been crushed, and then to about a size that you wanted to put it in the ball mill. The ball mill, if you'd ever been to our yard or some places you might go to a museum, a lot of people think they're cannonballs. They're not cannonballs. A lot of times you'll see steel balls, solid steel balls, maybe about this big around, and then they'll go on down to smaller balls. And that's what you put into the ball mill, so when that thing is turning and that ore, that rock and stuff's in there, that's what's grinding it up. And then the way, this was a flotation mill, and you had chemical reagents, and when you got that crushed, then that stuff was going down like into these vats and stuff, and it had skimmers and stuff and these reagents and so on and so forth. It just went like from one stage to the next until it got down into a concentrated form where basically it's just like black sand and beach sand looking stuff. And then that stuff, at the time I think we had 55-gallon drums or whatever, and we were shipping the concentrates that way. For a long time we shipped them to a mill in Selby near San Francisco, and then it got shut down. We for a short periods of time, we hit stuff that was pretty hot, and we didn't even have to mill it. We could just ship the ore direct to the smelter until they got shut down. And I remember, like once in a while I still go up to the old Whitmore, where this was off of Silver Queen Road, and during the Obama administration, they have come in there, they have, go ahead and go to the next frame, they have like put steel covers over a lot of the open shafts and so on and so forth, and that was a good thing. But what was very disheartening is there used to be 2 tin buildings up there. One was a hoist house, had a beautiful old hoist in it. I went to school from kindergarten to 7th grade in Rosamond, and then I went from 8th grade to graduation in Mojave. And Dad had come home one day, and he had the big carrot out there, which was for my brother and I had actually been selling magazine subscriptions, because if you remember, the 7th graders used to sell magazine subscriptions so the 8th graders could go to, yeah, what's the island?
Catalina.
Catalina, yeah. And I met the Barneses across the Roseman Boulevard there from where I lived, and they had a Shetland pony that their grandkids rode. And they told me that my brother and I could start coming over and riding that pony, and so that kind of started our horse career. And my dad told me, he said, well, if you guys want to go up there, if you'll move up there, I can work the mine, you guys can have horses and stuff, and you're still going to have to work and earn the money and buy them and pay for the feed and stuff. My mother, she just did it for the family. But that was a great place to grow up for a kid. I think we were on about 22 or 24, 20-acre mining claims, and it was great. It was great. That was pictures. Go back one. That was an old semi. That's some drill pipe from the oil fields at the Pauly Brothers yard and the shop building in the back. That my dad and uncle founded that steel and scrap yard back in about 49 or 50. Another interesting story there is about the time that they established that, they had this wasn't one of them, but they had some, I don't think, but that could have been a military surplus truck, but they had several of them that they turned into dump trucks and stuff, and they had A-frames on them, and they had the old PTO winches, and they once had a contract to remove all of the tapered redwood telegraph poles, the cross arms, the wire, and the insulators from Needles to Mojave. They ended up selling the contract from Barstow to Needles, and then they took everything down from Barstow to Mojave, and I still think, well, I know I've got some insulators. There's one building that's completely built, framed out of cross arms, and then there's some of that heavy gauge wire that came from that line, and those poles were all redwood, and they were tapered. They'd be probably, what, maybe 8 inches at the bottom, and then they taper up to maybe about 4 inches or something at the top. Beautiful, beautiful poles and beautiful lumber.
And where is that still? I mean, you still have some of that?
I still have a few remnants of that. In fact, there was I kind of got reacquainted here not long ago with a friend of mine from back in my high school rodeo days. And he had called me because he'd put some pictures out, some rodeo pictures, and this guy recognized my name or something. He wanted my contact information. Well, my friend called me. He didn't want to just give him the number. Well, this man ended up being a historian, and he wanted to come down and look at my old box car that's there in the yard. And so we went down and he took some pictures, and you know, we talked about some of the local history and so on and so forth. And, these pictures, that was where, that was the main house up there at the Whitmore. That's in a lot. We never did do too much to the outside. Dad did quite a bit of work on the inside of that old house. My brother and I slept in a bunkhouse to the west of that, but this was the main place where you know, the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom. And then at the top, I'm just going to guess that could possibly be at Randsburg, maybe even during their, I think they have a yearly celebration, and I'm panning, and then my brother's behind me, and my dad and my mom.
Now, Joe, I hear tell that when you were a kid, you didn't go play an Xbox, and you didn't go on your phone and screw around, but I hear that you guys did some panning as a child for play. Can you tell us how you did that?
Well, of course, Glenn Settle used to have the gold panning contest at the gold camp. And so, like I said, my dad just ate, breathed, I mean, he was part of the Pauly Brothers deal, but he ate, breathed, and slept mining and mining equipment. And so he entered that contest and stuff, and then he got us boys to start entering it. And we had a laundry room. I remember months ahead of time, we'd be in that laundry room practicing for the contest. And in 1964, I was the world junior champion. And then after that, my brother, and I'd actually broke a record then. I think it was a minute and something to pan out the 12 nuggets, which were about the size of your little fingernail. They had 8 of them that they pushed down to the first joint in a 12-inch pan and level it off. And then my brother, the next year, he broke that record again. He panned them, I think, in like 30-some seconds, 35, 36, whatever it was. I believe that either Raleigh Davis or Mike Murphy came in second that year, and I was third. When I was looking through all these pictures and stuff, I found a plaque from one of the old trophies. My mother was second, I think, in 1972 in the women's contest. So, and then there was bureau claim staking races out there that we got into, and so on and so forth. And this picture at the bottom is me up there at the Whitmore, and you can see that a Gallus frame is like up there, that was a vertical shaft that went down 200 feet. And then there was a, what you call a drift, which is like a tunnel. And then it went to the, I think it went northeast about 365 feet. And there was electric wire down there. There was air pipe. And right next to the hoist house was a big tin building that had a great big, like one-lunger compressor with a flywheel on it, damn near as tall as I am, and that pumped the air down into the mine. And then we had electric lights. And then my dad, when he lay way back, I mean, he used the old carbide lights where you bought the carbide, looks like a little barrel of like little rocks, and then you put that in the bottom of the carbide light, and then there's a place to put some water in it, and you screw the top on, and then you have a little igniter deal, and it makes the gas, and it gives you the light with the flame, and that's very important if you're ever anywhere where you're going to go somewhere and you might think the air's bad, because if the air's bad, then of course the flame's going to go out. Later on, we knew the air was good at the Whitmore, so Dad started using the electric lights with a battery pack on his belt, and they were just a lot more efficient and everything. But I remember, and this was part of the deal, like when we went up there, moved up there, Dad wanted to try to spend some time working the mine in the evenings. So, you know, maybe we'd eat dinner, supper, whatever, and he'd say, okay, it's 6 o'clock. I want to go down and work a couple hours till maybe about 8 o'clock. So we had some of them old GI phones, you know, that you would crank them up. We had one in the house, had another one at the hoist house, and then he had some down in the shaft. So he said, okay, about 8 o'clock, I'll ring you on the phone, and then we'll talk. And then he would go to the station, which was at the bottom there of the 200-foot level, where the ore bucket would be, and then he'd give me the signals. There's that old hoist house. It had a chart hanging there on the wall, and all the signals, because they're all different. There'd be to lower a man, I think, is a 3 bells, and then a hesitation, and 2 bells. To raise a man is 3 bells, and then a space, and then 1 bell. And then you had different bells if you were hoisting ore. And when you were hoisting a man, you were very careful. You didn't go too fast. You always had a hold of the brake. You never freewheeled the bucket. And you know, and you always waited for the bells to make sure that you know, he's supposed to be situated when you got the bells. And that was like a cable that went all the way down there, and you're hearing it at the top. When you're hoisting ore, it's an altogether different deal. These guys are back in the drift, and they're what you call tramming the ore. So they got ore buckets on railroad, on mine rail track, and they're pushing those down that drift until they get to that landing. And everything we had was end dumps, because it was fairly narrow. So you end dump that into that bucket, and then somebody give me the bells, and boy, I'd just hoist that out of there just as fast as I could get it to go. And then it's going to come up, and you can't see it very good here. Put your, right about there in the middle. Dave Kiefer can probably help me explain this. There's a couple little notches up there in that gallows frame, and a couple of little steel straps. And this bucket's got a couple little tips on the end of it, like maybe 3/4 inch rod or something sticking out about this far. You raise that bucket up above those little notches, and it flips those metal straps up. It flips them over so that now when you let the bucket back down, it's going to rest in that groove. And then you got a dump truck underneath there, and it dumps that bucket. And then that's going to go to the crusher. And then you bring that bucket back up, and then what it does is those little legs or tips, they knock those iron levers back down, and then the bucket goes right back down on the rails to the bottom of the shaft. And when you're hoisting ore, like I said, you're in kind of a hurry because they're bringing more ore to you. So when they did that on the way down, you would never do this with a man. A lot of times I'd just let it freewheel for a little bit, then I'd give it a little break. Just like, you know, a truck, put it in neutral going down a hill or something, but you probably would never do that with a truck because you never maybe get it back in gear, but it kind of is the same type of an analogy. But with this, you could drop it like that, let it freewheel, and then you just kind of feathered it. You didn't just, you know, drop it 100 feet and then give it some brake. You maybe dropped it, you know, a couple seconds, and then you just kind of kept feathering it, get it to the bottom, and then, you know, pretty quick they're going to be giving you the bells again to bring more. So.
May I add one more thing?
Go ahead.
When I was going through high school, my folks would have a part-time mine up there in Lone Pine Basic Mammoth area. I won't tell you where, but anyway, we still got this property in the family. Anyway, one day I was wanting to know how to do the, in my high school years, but I didn't have all the resources and stuff. Anyway, there was a guy who told me, called him somewhere, I think it was some guy told me that there was two processes. One was cyanide, and the other one was a aqua regia. We could do it through aqua regia. And so anyway, I went to the yard where your dad was, and his dad was a very bright individual. There wasn't anybody sharper in this area, I feel. And I asked your dad one day when I was down there trying to get some steel cut. Your dad helped me out. I said, how do you do cyanide? This guy knew everything. Well, almost. I found out later on, though, that he didn't know everything. I don't know anybody that knows everything, but he was the closest man I had to contact. Cyanide was very, well, it was made by DuPont in its original status. A lot of people in the Antelope Valley criticized it over the years for mining. It's from what I understand, a natural organic material. But, DuPont made it, and the guys used to mix it in the field in a 55-gallon drum, and they dropped dead. Some of them because of the gaseous smells that came from it. So I didn't want to get around that in high school. And so I asked your dad about how to do this aqua regia because it was proven to be a safer route, but it was a little more time consuming. And a lot of guys didn't know a lot about it. And his dad did. And he told me how to do it. I went to high school. And I talked to my science teacher, and the science teacher said, Jim, he said, if you give me a paper showing me how you want to do it, what chemicals you need, I'll let you do it right here in the high school. And I said, oh, marvelous. So I submitted this stuff to my science teacher. And he looked it over, and a day or two later he came back and he said, you can do this test in science class when everybody's out of here kind of thing. I'm like, okay. And I started it up. I'll never forget this day. It was comical anyway, to some of us. I'm sure the teacher caught hell about it. But anyway, we did this test with aqua regia, and what wound up happening is we didn't know it smelled real bad right off of its own gas, but it wasn't harmful to anybody. And anyway, we put this to a test, and they wound up shutting their classroom down that day because they wanted to know what was in this. It was sort of, it was our game moment for me. The only thing I didn't know that Joe didn't know was my family came up with a money venture and it had iridium. And it's a hard-faced metal they use. And I asked Joe about it. I said, Joe, how do you do iridium? And he said, there's no way that I know how to do it. We were kicking around everywhere looking for somebody who knew how to extract iridium. But it runs on water and it runs off the mountains out here in certain key areas. And I don't get a chance to visit a lot of this stuff anymore. It's been an honor knowing you, Joe, and your whole family.
Same here, thank you.
I've had one moment with you to look at you one time and say thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Been a gentleman and a scholar in this community.
That's right.
Go ahead and go to the next one. Yeah, that was an obituary, I guess, yeah, from my aunt. Her husband actually was, they lived for years in, 46 years in Oroville, California. Her husband was a tunnel driver up there for the dam when they built the Oroville Dam. And then the other one I think is my grandpa. I think when he passed away, I think I was about 10 years old. Anyway, go to the next one. And then that, I already read you the one on the left, that legal notice on the right, north of the Rosamond Hill here. My dad and uncle had several 20-acre BLM mining claims there for the decomposed granite. And I remember when I was a kid, some of those old GI trucks we had, they had a shovel over there, and we used to I'd go over there sometimes with him, and we would load DG, and then we'd take it to different places because they used it for roads and horse corrals and one thing and another to, especially like a lot of this Rosamond, we're in the lake bed, and like in the back of my yard down there, in the yard, there's 10 acres down there from Sierra Highway to 20th Street west. About half of that has got, I think, 100 and some odd those GI dump truck loads of DG in the front, and you can drive in there. But if it's a bad rainstorm from 20th to the back gate, you're probably going to get stuck because it's just nothing but lake bed. So, and then that was a legal notice that they finally ended up getting 3 of those patented so that they became, you know, like any regular deeded property. It's not a mining claim at that point. It's a regular, you own it, and you got the tax burden like with everything else. So. That all the pictures? Okay, that's fine. I got a few notes and stories and like about Muroc. One of the stories that Dad always told was that there was a man out there that actually they had some whiskey stills, and he would ask Dad. Dad had an old Indian motorcycle, and he'd ask him to kind of be on the lookout for the feds. And but one of the things that was funny is at the time that they ran cattle out there, and Dad said one time they had put this still back in where this bank was or something, and I guess they put some dirt over the top of it and covered it up, put some tin or something, and put some brush up there. And this steer come along one time, and I don't know what if it was just plywood or what it was, but he ends up falling through into where the still was. Oh. So that was kind of a funny story. And then this same fella, I believe his name was Mr. Murphy, he got this idea that he was going to start like a desert turtle or tortoise ranch. And I don't know, you know, all the particulars of it, but he asked my dad, he said, "Can you get me some turtles?" My dad told him, he said, I'll get you all the turtles you want. He said, you'll be crying for me to stop. And sure enough, he got him, I don't know how many, but this guy was feeding them alfalfa hay, and he finally told my dad, he said, you know what? He said, I need to get rid of these turtles, don't give me no more. And then, well, my dad, I already told you about my dad and Uncle Al trapping during the Depression. I wish I'd have found some photos. I know Dad talked about Charlie Anderson used to have a general store out there. I found no pictures at this point about that. I do remember, I don't know how many, if there's any of you, Dave Kiefer, do you remember Martin Engel, the assayer from Cantil?
Out of where, Joe?
Cantil. Martin Engel.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the old timers that's not with us. I remember we'd take trips out there once in a while, and you know, Dad would drop off an assay for Martin or pick up an assay, and that's a very, very important thing. I mean, in over my lifetime, having spent time in the scrap and steel business, the mining business, some rodeoing and ranching and so on and so forth, I have had the great pleasure of knowing quite an array of characters. And some of the most shady ones of those were these guys, and I know Dave Kiefer's probably run across some of them too, these guys that they think they've got some kind of a mine or whatever, and really they don't know anything about mining. If you're going to mine, and most of the mines anymore that are around are like, well, like up there, the Golden Queen at the Soledad, where, like Jim's saying, they're using cyanide. If it wasn't for the process, they would not be able to extract that, because the old timers had a ferocious reputation for, I mean, they got everything. You're not going to come back behind a professional old timer and there's nothing left. But because of the technology, the cyanide thing will work. But of course, that mountain is never going to look like it once did. And boy, that's a landmark. I mean, you could be coming back from Bishop or something and see that. And, you know you're about home when you saw that.
About the guy who kept hitting his head.
You're all right.
Yeah.
But you need to assay if it was free gold, then I mean that's what everybody dreams of is, oh man, you walk in there, that's the drift, that's the tunnel, and there's just nuggets and all there in the wall. Well, there's not many of those deals. Most of it's the hard rock, and so assaying is a very, very important part of it. If you don't get that assay and it's not going to run a certain amount to the ton so that you can pencil it out and make it profitable, it's just not going to work. Other stories I remember, there were several of the partners over time that they're at the mine. One was Roy Loomis. And when we first went up there, my brother and I didn't waste much time looking for something to ride, and because we wanted to get horseback or something. Well, the first thing that we owned was there was somebody in Kern that had 3 burros and 3 pack saddles that went with them for $75, and we rented a trailer, and Roy Loomis used his pickup, and he took my dad and then us 2 boys up there to Kern to get those burros, and we brought them home, and my dad thought after a week we were going to get tired of it. Well, later on, then we got horses, and then we started riding steers and bulls, and we started roping, and it just went on, and it hasn't ever really quit. I remember those 3 burros too one day. They'd been packed in the Sierras, and one was a big brown burro, and then that's the one my brother had, and then I had a good-looking little gray burro, and the other one's kind of a mousy colored burro that always followed us. Well, we're riding them out west of Holt Road out there through the desert, and everything's fine. They're just walking along, and all of a sudden, just in unison, those 3 burros just put the brakes on, their ears shot forward, and they would not move. My brother and I were looking at each other. Finally get off, walk down the trail about 100 feet, and guess what? Rattlesnake. Pretty amazing.
They smell them or what?
I don't know. They might have seen him. I don't know, but it was. I'll never forget that. Royal Dutch shell. That was there at the Whitmore to the north of us was the yellow dog. I believe the Burton brothers still have those claims.
Yeah, there's several families.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To the east of us was the Standard Hill, and I can't. Was that the exposed treasure on the Standard Hill, or was that on the Soledad?
The what?
The exposed treasure. I can't remember what the name of the one was on Standard Hill, but anyway, they ended up. If you go that way now, if you're on the freeway, you'll see how a lot of that basically it's a rock quarry now. But at one time, Royal Dutch shell was in there, and they had taken a lot of ore out from over there on Standard Hill. They did 60 or 80 exploratory holes where we were on the Whitmore, but the problem was too much overburden. Overburden is just too much ground. You know, you had. And they didn't want to get into the underground mining because of all the safety stuff and the money and everything. They estimated at that time, which was, I guess, back probably in the 80s or 90s, there was probably $365,000 worth of ore in there at that time. And the Whitmore ran about 2/3 silver and about 1/3 gold. So I don't know what that would be worth today, but it would be, I guess, considerably
Yeah, the
more.
problem you run into, you don't want a lot of silver.
Yeah, it was like that horn silver. It would just be that ore, just be black as could be. And then Robert Pistone, this morning I was kind of writing myself some notes and stories here, trying to remember stuff, and there was a couple I forgot. Robert Pistone reminded me of one. Elma Payne was my first grade teacher here in Rosamond. You remember Elma?
Yeah.
Okay, her husband, John, was a miner. And John worked at one time at the Yellow Dog. And he was in a kind of a small place. It was just about big enough probably to back a pickup into. And he just, time after time, he kept banging his head on the overburden above him. And one day he just got madder than hell, and he drilled that and he shot it, and when they come back and they mucked that out and shipped it, I cannot remember to this day, and you may know this, but that was a rich strike for, like I said, for just a one-time deal. I mean, it wasn't a vein that just kept going and going and going. But it was, they just hit a rich pocket, and that all came about because he kept banging his head on that, and it made him mad. And Robert reminded me of that. We used to, like on a year like this, I mean, this is a good feed year. A lot of people, if you don't know anything about this desert, in a year like this, of course, most of the sheep and stuff are gone anymore, but this is some of the best, in a good year like this, some of the best feed conditions for sheep and cattle probably anywhere there is. And it's like that fillory that grows. It's a clover. And when I was younger, I mean, sometimes in the summer, we used to clean some copper out of like generators and starters and stuff. We helped Dad hoist, or I did a little bit of mining and stuff too, and my brother and I both had some ore at one time. We shipped a little bit of ore. We did a little bit of this and that, but if we could, we'd be horseback. We used to ride all over this country. I remember riding down to the arena over here at the high school one time. It was kind of storming, and we didn't really care that much until Mom come with the car and got mad at us and run us back home to the Silver Queen Road. And then once in a while we'd take a pickup truck and go out west of town, out there or out west of the Whitmore, where there was more of the Joshua trees and stuff, and we'd dump off a bunch of stuff. and then we'd go back home and get the horses and stuff and just go out there and camp in the middle of the desert. I mean, how many of your kids would you want to have them do something like that nowadays? You know, the way everything is. But back in them days, nobody thought anything of it. In a year like this, I would put her out and hobble her front feet, and then about every hour I would check on her, and she'd usually just be, you know, moseying around and eating fillery and bunch grass and stuff. Well, I went out there one time, and she's nowhere to be seen. So the light bulb kind of come on in my head when we went on vacation. My brother and I and the neighbor girl used to take riding lessons when we first got our horses from Jack and Gladys Adams over on Bacchus Road. And if you go up Mojave Tropico now, and then it swings around and it turns into Silver Queen Road, they got all that's fenced now with barbed wire and stuff, but we used to ride like basically around the west side of the Soledad Mountain and just, you know, go straight to Jack and Gladys's. And in the winter, we'd have a cup of hot cocoa or something. In the summer, we'd have a soda, and then we'd go out and we'd take a little riding lesson for an hour or so, and we'd ride back. And I got to thinking, you know, that mare of mine, she's gone to Jack's. And sure enough, before I got halfway there, Jack Adams used to have an old, about a 1.5 ton Chevy or GMC stock truck. And here he is coming my way with my mare in the back, and she had went with those hobbles on. They just hopped like a kangaroo. Oh. went about 5 miles. 5 miles. We used to have some deep pit barbecues too, like during the gold panning contest and stuff up there at the Whitmore, and like my brother and I think Joe Davis would help us with those. We had no regular phone up there. There was a neighbor, George Ritchie, that lived about a half a mile to the west. He was on Mrs. Knight's property. Mrs. Knight, her husband at one time, way back in the history of California, he was the governor of the state. But we would use that phone, and then that brings to mind another story that I have, and this is not a good, it's a good story, but it's a bad situation.
Didn't he own that Standard Hill at one time?
I don't think he owned the Standard Hill. He owned one of them, I think, on the Soledad. Oh. There's several mines up there in the Soledad, but I'm sure that somebody like Cliff Burton would know all of them, but I can't remember all of them and exactly where they were. But one time I remember we were a horseback, and down to the north of us there where the Yellow Dog is, there's a little dry lake. And my brother and I are riding, and all of a sudden, I mean, you smell the smell that if you ever smell it, you will never forget it in your life. And there's stuff scattered on the ground and a wallet. And I told my brother, I said, there's something's wrong here. And we rode a little bit farther, and right next to a greasewood, it looked like somebody had drove a pickup up there, changed their oil, and then just drove off. But there was no tracks, you know, like that. But that's what it looked like. And I told my brother, I said, there's somebody dead and buried right there. The closer you got, you could smell it. So we took off and rode down to George Ritchie's place and called the sheriff. And sure enough, the coroner come. And the story I got was the old Frontier Club there in Mojave. Some guy was flashing a bunch of cash, and some guys followed him out, smacked him with a tire iron, and there he was. So, bad deal, but it's something that, and this morning that was a story I didn't remember, but all the rest of this stuff kind of got me to thinking about that. Oh, and then another one. A little bit to the northwest of the Whitmore, right down there on the flat, right to the west of Holt Road. Anybody ever heard of Reefer City?
Yeah.
Yeah, the boxcars, the wooden boxcars where people lived during the Depression. All that's gone. But when I was a kid, there were still some of those boxcars there. That was quite a place to grow up. I don't regret it a bit. Back here, this gentleman right here, I hadn't seen him for a long, long time, Eddie Meeks. He was talking to me before I started. He said he's got a photograph of a 10 stamp mill that my dad had once had. Dad went all over the country. Actually, one of the first things he did is the train ride down at Disneyland, Thunder Mountain. They wanted rock and they wanted some different, you know, just what would you call it, props and stuff. So we had some stuff in the yard, and Dad had some stuff laying around, and so he sold them a bunch of that stuff, and then he went over there at the base of the Soledad Mountain and ended up getting them a bunch of rock that they used in that ride. And then later on, he was working with a partner that they were going to ship some of that stuff, I think, to Disneyland France or something, but the partner was trying to get kind of greedy and stuff, and my dad just finally, he just told the guys from Disney, he said, I'm just going to quit this guy and forget it, you know. But I was looking at some pictures this morning of like different equipment and stuff Dad had looked at, because after he retired, he went to Montana and just all over the country just looking for equipment, and we had claims at different places. We used to have a claim that was called the Vulcan Mine. I think that's probably about all I can think of, but I sure appreciate everybody's coming. Go ahead, Jim.
Good job, Neil.
There's something that always gets missed on some of these meetings. I didn't want to take the joy away from you. But out there where your yard is, there's a famous highway.
You see it.
And it's called the Grand Army Republic Highway. And the Civil War veterans set it up. It's called US 6. And if it wasn't for those Grand Army Republic Civil War veterans of Stanislaus County setting up that highway, we wouldn't have had this meeting today, most likely. Because I tell you this, those were some grand old men that just supported a grand old flag. And the interesting thing about the Grand Army Republic Highway that has been lost, but I remember it, and they say you can't teach old fools new tricks. If you went down to that Grand Army Highway in its original form, one sign, it was a star. They were all stars. And the point on those stars might have been black on one way, but you turned your car around and you looked at the other sign, was a little bit different. And it had white points on the star. And then the logos were different, but they were all symbolically similar. There's some good stories and some bad stories to tell about that highway. But it was our defense mechanism against all enemies, foreign and domestic, in case of invasion from the west coast or the northern border. It was the longest highway in the United States infrastructure. And it went all the way from Long Beach, all the way to Bishop, and then all the way from Bishop, all the way to Massachusetts in its strand. And some of the parts of the highway are lost. I know some of them. A lot of things that are lost in this country, and some of us better remember. But I tell you this, Joe, one of the most honorable things you ever did in your family was never mentioned. There's been that you showed in the pictures, some of them, including yourself. My family complimented Joe and Joe's family complimented mine. And then I take my hat off to you, my friend. I'm a funny guy sometimes, but I'm being dead serious now. They don't call me a little stinker for nothing. Joe, your active participation with the Mojave Greens in Mojave, which was an organization that helped the old prospectors and miners maintain their properties from invasion here, the back row, and a few other you out here. You all know who you are. I wish I knew all of you. And, that's the end of my spiel. I wouldn't miss this meeting for nothing, Joe. I'm feeling pretty under the weather right now, but there's a couple of people in Kern County I would stand up for.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And some of your stories we need to have in writing so we can keep them in our archives. Again, thank you all for coming. Remember that we have a big celebration and we need your help. And if you can, Joe, do you have the sign up? Okay, Joe has the sign up right back there.
As in Joe Kinga versus Joe Pauly.
And she signed everybody up already. But anyway, we really do appreciate you coming. We would like to have your help in May, and if you can't help us, at least come and see the displays in May. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Well, again, thank you all for attending.
Thank you.